Something really fascinating and frankly a little bit concerning is going on inside our colleges and universities right now. The academic job market. It is not what it used to be. And today we're going to unpack the powerful forces that are driving this massive change. So let's get right into it.
See, under the surface of everyday campus life, a huge, quiet shift is underway. You could almost call it a great unrest among the very people who make higher education tick.
And it really all boils down to this one kind of staggering question. Why on earth would so many of our brightest minds, professors, researchers, administrators, be looking for the door? What is really going on here? Well, get ready for this number, 66%. Yeah, you heard that right. That's 2 out of every 3 people working in higher ed who are open to a new job. This isn't just some small trend, folks. This is a seismic shift in the academic world.
But here's the thing. To really understand that 66% figure, we have to look a little deeper. The real story is hiding in a divide that splits this whole talent pool into 2 very, very different groups.
And check this out. When you actually break down the numbers, it gets really interesting. Only 17% are what we'd call active seekers, the people you'd expect to be job hunting. But the real story, the massive, overlooked group, is that huge 49% chunk of passive seekers. This is the hidden majority, and they are the key to this whole thing.
So what's the difference between these 2 groups? Well, your active seekers, they're driven by some kind of immediate unhappiness. They're updating their CVs, they're hitting the job boards hard. But the passive seekers, they're actually pretty content where they are. They aren't looking, but, and this is the important part, they're listening. They can absolutely be poached by a better offer, a better work culture, or a bigger opportunity. This is the talent that institutions now have to actively go out and hunt for.
So this leads to the next big question, right? What's creating this environment where almost half the entire workforce is just passively waiting for a better offer to come along? The data points to a few really key reasons.
First up, and this one is huge, is this feeling of being invisible. A full 59% of higher ed professionals feel like their voice just isn't heard at work. And think about it, when people feel ignored, their loyalty starts to wear thin, even if they like their actual day-to-day job.
And of course, you knew this was coming. Compensation is a massive factor. Fewer than 4 in 10 people in academia feel like their paycheck actually lets them live the life they want. That is a serious gap, and it makes offers from outside the university walls look pretty darn appealing.
And what's really interesting is this seems to be a problem that goes all the way to the top. While people might feel supported by their direct manager, there's this powerful sense that the big institutional leaders are just out of touch. They don't seem to get the campus culture or what their faculty and staff actually need.
Okay, so let's zoom out for a second, because all this internal dissatisfaction isn't happening in a bubble. It's actually crashing up against some really challenging market forces, creating what you might call a perfect storm.
Institutions themselves are facing some serious headwinds. We're talking about a projected drop in student enrollment, hiring freezes popping up at major universities, and big cuts to the federal research funding that so many schools depend on.
And here's the critical part. In response to all this pressure, the very nature of an academic job is changing. A whopping 68% of faculty roles are now non-tenure-track. That classic dream of a stable, tenured position, it's becoming a much, much harder goal to reach. But this squeeze isn't hitting every department the same way. If you look at this table, you can see a pretty clear split. Fields like health professions and business, they've got a really strong job outlook. But then look over at the humanities. The growth trend is actually declining, creating a much, much tougher market for job seekers.
Okay, so the market's complicated. We get it. So the question is, how do you actually succeed in this new landscape? Whether you're the one looking for a job or you're the one trying to hire, you absolutely need a clear strategy.
All right, if you're actively on the hunt, listen up. The old rules don't apply. Just sending out a generic CV isn't going to cut it anymore. Success now means you have to tailor every single application, network with real purpose, look beyond just the big research universities, and build an online presence that really makes you stand out. And for employers, the script has totally flipped. You can't just post a job and wait for the best people to show up. You have to become a hunter, and that means being proactive, using targeted ads, building great employee referral programs, and reaching out personally to connect with that huge pool of passive talent that isn't even looking at your job board.
So what's the secret weapon for these talent hunters? Well, it might not be what you think. This quote from a Herc workforce survey is so revealing.
9 out of 10 job seekers prioritize a sense of community and belonging above other factors, even above salary. A strong, supportive culture is your ultimate recruiting tool.
So, all of this leaves us with one final thought. In a market where you have a small group of active job seekers and a much, much larger group of talented people who can be persuaded to move, the roles have completely reversed. It forces every single one of us to ask, in this new academic landscape, are you the one hunting for a job or are you the one being hunted?